Thank you, Christine, and welcome everybody. Again, my name is Michael Skinner. I am the liaison for nursing, health science, and pharmacy, at least for a few more days. I'm getting ready to become the director of the Watson Wise Library out at the Health Science Center, 271, starting next week, but I will be around for a few more of these sessions. So welcome everybody, and let's go ahead and get started. Let me just switch gears here. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get started. Sorry, just got to move the Zoom window down so that I can see what I'm doing here. All right, there we are. All right, so this is our PubMed session. PubMed is, of course, an important database. It's the largest free biomedical database on the planet. When I started doing health, science, and nursing librarianship back in 2012, I think the tally here was 20 million citations in PubMed. So it's grown quite a bit in just the 10 years that I've been doing this. And PubMed is one of 3 databases that I consider to be your usual suspect databases. They're core. Anytime I do a search, anytime I'm asked to do a search for clinical information, it's the first one I consult. I will usually consult CINAHL as well and Cochrane Library, and I may do a few others depending upon the focus of the question, but I never leave PubMed out of account. So it's an important database for your searching, whether you're searching for clinical information or for less practice-focused information. It's an important one to be able to find your way around, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. And we're going to start with the question, what is PubMed? Now, obviously, we know it's a database, but there are many databases, literature databases out there. PubMed is it's a unique database in that it's an umbrella database. And the best analogy I can think of for describing it, it's like those stackable babushka dolls, you know, the ones where you have the small one that's solid wood, and then you put it inside of hollow ones going all the way up. Well, that's what PubMed is kind of like. It's kind of like a shell database that includes other databases. And the 3 most prominent databases that are included in PubMed are the Medline Database. It says mesh down here. It's referring to the mesh database of terms, but that's part of Medline, and I'll explain that in a minute. So you've got the Medline database. That's a big chunk of PubMed. In fact, I would say it's about 90% of the database. PubMed Central. PubMed Central is it's a digital archive of open access content that is maintained by the National Library of Medicine, and lots of good stuff there. And it's a major source of the free full text that you'll find on PubMed these days. And then lastly, items from the Ncbi Bookshelf. This is another open access repository, but instead of being a repository of journal content, it's a repository of mostly government published free books, full text books, some books from private publishers, but mostly from public sources. And it's a good place to come for free material of that sort. You don't come across a lot of items from the bookshelf when you do a PubMed search, but you will come across some. So it's good to be aware of what you're going to get when you search it. Now, I want to talk a bit more about Medline, because Medline is the main database that's part of PubMed. And we're going to do that by starting over here with latest literature. So this is a section at the bottom of the PubMed intro screen. Like once you get past your utilities here, you got your learn, find, download, and explore, and they've got important links that we'll talk about in a minute. Beneath that, you've got trending articles on the left and latest literature on the right. The latest literature links, those are links to records that have just been added to PubMed. They've been uploaded from the publisher. So we've got journals like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Blood, Cancer Research, Cochrane Database, etc. Let's just have a quick look at some of these records. Okay, so we've got 2 here from Cancer Research, and we'll look at the first one. Distinct cell adhesion signature defines glioblastoma, myeloid-derived suppressor cell subsets. And what we notice when we open up this particular record is that pretty much all the information we're seeing here is what's been supplied by the publisher. It's what you'd expect, okay? So it's a recently uploaded record. We've got the citation, Got the journal, we got the year of publication and the DOI information, the title of the article, the list of authors, et cetera, et cetera. But then beneath that information, and sandwiched between the citation and the abstract, we have information that is coming from PubMed. Okay, so we have the PubMed ID. This is a unique numerical identifier that is supplied by PubMed to every record that's added to the database, and that's the first indication that we're dealing with a PubMed record. We're not dealing with sorry, my mind is playing tricks on me. We're not dealing with a Medline record yet. Sorry, I couldn't bring that in, but it is a PubMed record. Chances are this record will eventually become part of Medline. But what makes a PubMed record more than just a PubMed record is the presence or absence of mesh headings. Okay, so let's go back out here and I'll show you what that looks like. Most of you, if you've had anything to do with PubMed, you've probably already seen them many times, but let's have a look at one here. Might take me a minute to find one, but we will look at that. One's not it. Let's go back down, have a look at the second one. Okay, so right down here at the bottom of this record, we have, again, we got the citation, we have the abstract, we have figures, we have references, and right down the bottom, we have these linked subject headings, these mesh terms. These are all subject headings that are assigned to records, to records that belong to journals that are part of the Medline database. Okay, so anytime you see a record in PubMed, if it has these links, it's a Medline record. If it doesn't have these links, it's not a Medline record, or it's not yet a Medline record. Years ago, when I was a kid, there used to be a microwave company called Amana, and their byline was, if it doesn't say Amana, it's not a radar range. And it's kind of a similar principle with Medline records. If it doesn't have mesh, it's not a Medline record, but it could be a PubMed record. All right. So Medline records are records that have mesh headings assigned, and there is a certain percentage of PubMed records that will never become Medline records. They will just always be, they just don't fit the criteria to be included in Medline. Part of the reason why knowing about Medline is important is that Medline actually has a vetting process for their journals. So any journal that is added to the Medline database, before it does so, it has to go through a vetting process, and the folks at the National Library have a look at it and make sure that its publishing practices meet their rigorous requirements for academic integrity and whatnot. So there's that. And some of the other databases in here, like the PubMed Central. PubMed Central is just a repository, so there is no selection process like there is for Medline records. So that's something to be aware of. If you come across a record and it has PMC in it and it doesn't have the Medline headings, you're probably going to want to have a closer look at that journal. Maybe look it up in the directory of open access journals just to make sure that its bona fides are all there. It's always good to be aware of that. And in fact, when I'm asked to look at journals to see if they're non-predatory, one of the things that I look at is the publisher's knowledge and understanding of indexes and the way they work. Usually people who have had lots to do with scholarly publishing, they understand the difference between an index and a web browser. And one of the telltale signs that they don't know what they're talking about is if they say, our journal is published in PubMed. PubMed's not the test. Being indexed in Medline is. So just be aware of that. All right. So that's where the records are coming from for PubMed. They're coming from Medline, from PubMed Central, and from the Ncbi Bookshelf. All right. Now let's get on and let's have a look at our mock-up question here. I put together a PICO, and this is it. In patients with alcohol abuse disorder, does diazepam compared to naltrexone improve alcohol avoidance? Okay. Now, we're not going to focus in on the outcome. We're just going to focus in on the first three bits there: alcohol abuse disorder, diazepam, which is our intervention, and naltrexone, which is our comparison. And we're going to see what we can find there. It's just going to do a basic search here. And so I'm just going to put my terms in. I can either do this in advanced search or I can do it in the simple search screen. I'm going to start with just the simple search screen and see what I find here. So go ahead and click that one, start searching that. And I always pay attention to the results I get just so that I know if a term needs bolstering or not. And that one's pretty healthy. We'll keep searching. We'll keep adding our terms here. Disulfiram is it's a drug that's used to treat alcohol abuse disorder. See how many records we get for that one. Ooh, that one's kind of small, disulfiram. All right. So for this one, we might want to look at adding to that with an OR search, but I'll keep going here first, and I'll see what we get for naltrexone now. All right. Okay, so we got 10,000 search results for that one. So I'm thinking that maybe disulfiram needs a few more, needs a bit of help. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the screen here, and I'm going to try and add things from the mesh database. Now, more about that in a minute, but I'm going to see if there are terms that we can add from the mesh database. Let's go to disulfiram. Let's add disulfiram to the mesh database. Okay, and so now I'm searching in the mesh database. It looks a lot like PubMed, but I can tell that I'm in mesh both because the word mesh appears right here at the top of the screen, and also because in the drop-down menu it sets to mesh. So I'm just going to look for the term disulfiram, and there it is right there. And the great thing about mesh is it gives you a lot of information about each term. So I know what the term is. I've got a scope note definition of it. So it's a carbamate derivative used as an alcohol deterrent. It is a relatively non-toxic substance when administered alone, but markedly alters the intermediary metabolism of alcohol. When alcohol is ingested after administration of disulfiram, blood acetaldehyde, sorry, probably messing that up. Acetaldehyde concentrations are increased, followed by flushing, systemic vasodilation, respiratory difficulties, nausea, hypotension, and other symptoms. So we've got the definition. That's how PubMed indexers understand the term when they use it. And then right down here we have subheadings. So if I don't pick any of these subheadings and I search disulfiram by itself, it's going to search for all records that have any or none of the subject headings, the subheadings. But if I pick one, like let's say I pick therapy, it's going to narrow just to those terms. I'm not going to worry about that today, but I just wanted to highlight it. Another thing that the mesh record has is it has entry terms. Okay, so these are the terms that their term disulfiram stands for. So basically, these are just synonymous terms for disulfiram. Tetrarum, antabuse, alkafobin, anticol, dicuprol, esperol, antabuse. Okay, so now traditionally, when I was trying to bolster a search result, I would first thing I would do is combine the keyword term with the mesh term like this. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to search this term as a mesh term, and you can see it there, the term and its mesh coding. And here we got 3,670 results. I'm going to go into advanced search and just have a look here. So I've got disulfiram, I've got 4,723 search results plus 3,670. Let's see what happens when I combine them. Now, usually what happens when I combine them is I get a larger search result. I'll just tell you that right now. Sorry, one second. But I noticed something recently, and I want to see if it's going to happen today. Okay. You probably can't tell. Let me go into advanced search and show you. Okay, so traditionally, when I combine the keyword with the mesh term, I get a larger search result. I'm not doing that. Okay, look at what I got for just the keyword term, 4,723. I got exactly that for combining both the keyword term, number 3, with the mesh term. So what's going on there, you may be asking? My hunch is that the search engineers at PubMed they've tweaked the search algorithm, and they've leveraged the power of mesh's term mapping. so that you don't have to combine terms like that. You automatically get everything they've got when you just put in the keyword term now. And you can see this if we go back to, let's just go back to the term disulfiram, and I'll show you what I'm talking about when I talk about term mapping. Each of these terms here under entry terms, when they appear in a record, you know, they're getting picked up, and so let's say you did a search for antabuse or an anticolon, you didn't use disulfiram. Well, the database, because it has these terms associated with their mesh term, it's automatically pulling in the mesh terms, you know, when you're searching any of the other terms that are associated with it. So that's pretty helpful. It's pretty keen. There are other ways that you can expand a search if you can't combine search keywords with mesh terms. And one of the ways that you can do that is to use some of these other terms like antabuse here. Let's try seeing what we get when we combine. Let's go back to our advanced search screen. Okay. And let's pull up disulfiram number 3 or antabuse and see how we do. Got us a few more there. Got us a few more. So that netted us almost, I would say, 49 more hits. Okay, so there is still value in referring to the mesh database, but some of its usage has changed. So now if you're using mesh terms, one of the best ways to use the mesh terms is if you only want to search for Medline records. You can still use it that way. The Medline database, it originates in PubMed, but there are commercial versions of it that are available through EBSCOhost. EBSCO has a version of Medline. Ovid has a version of Medline. I think OCLC Search has a version of Medline. And when you search those databases, you know, you're just searching the Medline records. If you want to have a similar experience in PubMed, you can just search the mesh terms, and it's going to give you just the records that are coming from the Medline database. But if you want to expand your search now, and you're not extremely familiar with you know, other, you know, either clinical or drug vocabulary terms, the mesh database is still a great place to go in its entry terms to find terms to combine with your original term in what's known as a nested OR search. So this search here, number 7, that's a nested OR because we combined 2 synonymous terms together with OR, and it gave us a slightly larger search result. All right. So let's go through here and have a look at what we've got. So we're interested in finding comparative studies of, I probably picked the wrong one. Let me go back here. I don't think I combined these. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's just do the first 3, number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. And of course, I've switched from ORing them together to combining with AND because these are conceptually different search sets, and I want to get what's in common with them all. So I want records to be retrieved that have all 3 terms in them. So I'm going to AND them all together. Going to click search. Okay, and so we went from 4,000 plus results down to 245 results. And when we look at the date range, we go from 1991 to 2022. Now, obviously, we're interested in the most recent clinical information if we want to use this to make a clinical decision. So we have options. We can manually move our publication date range to be closer to 2022, or we have options to do publication date down here. We can go anywhere from 1 to 10 years, or we can do a custom range. We'll set it for the last 5 years. And then if we want to zero in on studies that are likely to have a comparison, we can look at the article type filters right here in the center. And we have some important study designs represented here. We got meta-analyses, randomized controlled trials, systematic reviews. But I want to take an indirect route. I want to look for comparison studies first. So I'm going to click additional filters. Select comparative study. What that's going to do, it's going to put comparative study on our article type palette here. So now if I select it, I'm going to go from 247 records down to, it looks like a single record, adherence across FDA-approved medications for alcohol use disorder and Veterans Administration population. So the objective of this study, FDA-approved medications exist for the treatment of alcohol abuse disorders. However, their effectiveness depends on proper adherence to prescribed regimen. And not exactly what we're looking for, but we'll keep going with it. Differences in adherence across medications may have implications for clinical outcomes and may provide helpful information in considering treatment options. The study aims to identify significant differences in adherence if present. Conclusions, these results demonstrate that overall adherence to medication-assisted treatment for alcohol use disorder is low across all medications. When directly compared, diazepam had significantly lower adherence than both oral and extended release injectable naltrexone. All right, so not exactly what we're looking for, but good example, well, sort of a good example of a record that has the comparative study publication type. Doesn't really match in terms of the kind of study design that would establish which is more effective at limiting alcohol cravings and whatnot. So we're probably looking for something else, and we may need to we might need to widen the scope of our publication dates to see if we can find it there. So let's go back and do that. Let's switch out from 5 years to 10 years and see if that helps us. And then we'll add comparative study back in and see if, okay, so we got 2. Pharmacological industry perspective on the economics of treatments for alcohol and opioid use disorders. Yeah, okay, let's go. Okay, so I could add in here randomized controlled trial. I'm not going to do that because when you combine more than one article type in your filtering, it ORs them together. So I would end up with a larger search result. So I'm just going to deselect comparative study. I'm going to try a different approach now. Let's go in under randomized controlled trial. Let's see what we got here. Naltrexone and diazepam treatment response in veterans with alcohol dependence and co-occurring problem gambling features. That's an RCT, pharmacogenetics of naltrexone and diazepam, alcohol-dependent dually diagnosed veterans. All right, quality of life, effectiveness of psychoanalytic interaction, group therapy. Yeah, that's a non-medical treatment. We're interested in how comparative effectiveness of these 2 drugs. Combining medical treatment and CBT with treating alcohol-dependent patients. All right, it looks like the one I'm looking for. As you can probably tell, I pre-searched this search, and I think the one I'm looking for is actually just a bit beyond this. It's a little bit farther outside. It's like 2011. That's okay. We'll have a look at this one real quick. Okay. Okay. Diazepam and naltrexone were evaluated in treatment of individuals with co-occurring alcohol dependence and other access 1 disorders. We explored pharmacogenetic interactions in genotype subjects. Okay, so there's a bit of genetic medicine going on here. Yeah, okay. Well, neither one of these really met my criteria. They weren't what I was looking for, but I got other things to talk about, so we'll keep going there. I might need to go back and increase the number of search results for diazepam. We already found that it had the lowest search retrieval, so I'd probably want to bolster that a bit more, but that's okay. So let's say I was doing a fairly systematic search and I got a lot of material that I wanted to add to my bibliography of results. If I have a reference manager like Zotero or SciWheel, I have the browser extensions like I do for SciWheel here. I can just open that one up and select the destination that I want to put it, and proceed accordingly. I might do that now just for the sake of demonstration. I've got a file open here. I'm just going to select that one, and then I can pick and choose as I like and put them into SciWheel directly. Just click add like that. Sometimes from time to time, you'll find that your browser extension doesn't behave itself. That happens to me on occasion. It's good to have a backup strategy in case that happens. And a great strategy for PubMed is just to select the records that you want to add, like I did with these down here. You go up to Save at the top of the display list, click that, and then look at your formatting options and just make sure that it's set to either PubMed ID or CSV. I find that PubMed IDs are a bit more machine readable, so I usually select those, click Create a File, and then what I do is I open up the file, I copy these two PubMed IDs. And again, as we saw at the beginning of the hour, these are unique identifiers that are associated with each record. Get rid of that and just scroll this over here, go back to the A file. And I'm going to go to Import References, select Identifiers, make sure that I'm set for multiple PubMed IDs. Just paste them in with Control V, and then I can add them in that way. And I'll go from 6 records on up to 8. Okay. All right. So PubMed comes with a lot of really helpful features for when you're doing like a lot of detailed searching and you have a lot of records to get out. That PubMed ID save is a really great one for getting a lot of content very quickly. And using PubMed IDs is a great way to just do a general search. So let's say you were having trouble finding an article, and you wanted to get hold of your liaison and have them do a bit more searching for you. If you give us the PubMed ID, what we can do is we can search for it directly. Now, of course, the numbers themselves aren't unique, but because PubMed is available freely on the web, when you do a Google search, it's going to include those PubMed results as part of that. So there we go. All right, so that's just a great way of communicating with your liaison. It's also a great way of communicating with collaborators, sharing records between yourselves. So yeah, that's good value for that. What else? All right, so sometimes you'll do a search and you're just not finding. If you've done any amount of searching, you'll find that you're either going to have a feast, you're going to get an abundance of records, and a lot of them are going to be topic relevant, or you're going to find yourself in a situation where you can find almost nothing on your topic. And the great thing about PubMed and some other databases, but PubMed is certainly among those, is that it gives you alternate ways to look for relevant records. And one of them that I like to use, particularly when I'm stumped, is what I call exemplar searching. So if I've done a lot of searching and I can find at least one record in PubMed that is spot on or close to spot on what I'm looking for, what I will do is I will go into the detailed version of that record and I will look at their similar articles and I will look at their cited bys, okay? And what these particular bibliographies are doing, they're looking in a couple of different directions. Similar articles is kind of looking for, it's doing a horizontal search to see if there's anything that has similar mesh terms, similar term mapping that might be another close match. And frequently you'll find, more records that are relevant that way. Another way to search is using cited by, and basically what you're doing is you're looking ahead at the articles that have cited this record as part of their own scholarly work. And the reason for that is that if your article, the article that is of interest to you, was important to another researcher, maybe they're doing work in a similar vein. It doesn't always work out that way, but it can be helpful. And sometimes it's a fair treasure trove. There's only 3 for this article, but then I think this article is fairly recent. It was published just 5 years ago, so you wouldn't expect too much. But in the similar articles column, there's a lot of material here. So you can click similar articles here. And okay, maybe not as much as I thought. You've got 12 results, but it's just another way to laterally search and add to your search result. Let's say I wasn't just interested in a particular topic, but I was interested in more works by these authors, like particularly John Grant, the lead author here. All of these names are are linked, and I can do an author search just by clicking on the author's name, and I get another list of results. Now, there is one caveat in doing this kind of searching, and that is that many people have the same first and last name, so you may get a search result that confounds the work of a couple of different authors. So just be aware of that. But this is a way of looking, and you can do other things besides that. You can do an affiliation search. Sometimes I will be asked to help, like particularly with researchers in the early phases of their work, and they're trying to find, they're trying to track down the corresponding author of an instrument that they would like to adapt or to use, and they want permission and whatnot, rather than just going off and doing it on their own. PubMed has a lot of great indexing, and one of the fields that I've leveraged a lot through the years is the affiliation field, to help find a particular author. Let's say let's just do something on Bandura. Okay, let's go Bandura. Let's say I was trying to track down Mr. Bandura. I'm not even sure if Mr. Bandura is still alive. He's been around for a long time. Bandura, okay, looks like he was still publishing in 2022. I'm trying to track this person down, so I want to find an institutional address so that I can get an email and correspond with this person. So J Bandura, K Bandura, I think it was A Bandura was the one I was looking for. Maybe not. Well, for our purposes, we'll just go with one of these. And let's say I wanted to correspond with this person. If I can find a publication where they were recently like lead author and the corresponding author, I can find their information down here in the affiliation field, and I can grab that and send an email and request their permission to use their instrument or their work and whatnot. So the affiliation field is very useful for that. It's also a great field as a searchable field. Let's go back to advanced search. You can use that to generate lists, like let's say we were interested in scholarly representation of UT Tyler faculty in the PubMed database. So we'll just do an affiliation search, and let's see how many times UT Tyler affiliation comes up. Really? Okay, that's because I've got it set. Let's just reset all filters and let's see what we do there. Interesting. UT Tyler. Let's try University of Texas at Tyler. Maybe I needed to be a bit more thorough. University of Texas. The of in there in just a moment. Okay, University of Texas at Tyler affiliation search. Okay, 19. It's a good start. And you can keep going. You can do lists on things like let's say you were interested in nursing articles, School of Nursing, University of Texas at Tyler, Purdue, and the great thing about these, about the coding in PubMed, it's really easy to reproduce, to mimic. Okay, so there we go. We got five articles that are indexed in PubMed by UT Tyler nursing faculty. So yeah, the indexing in PubMed is really amazing and can really help you narrow down your search to specifics. You can go down to the level of pagination if you're looking for a particular article, and the pagination of it, et cetera, et cetera. This is all based upon the fact that PubMed is so well indexed. Okay, so besides the information that's available from the publisher in the citation, the abstract, they just do a really great job of providing information, metadata on, in the publication type field, their mesh terms, et cetera, et cetera. They really do a good job of providing places to go and look for further information. So let's go back out here. Another way that you can search PubMed, it's a little off the beaten track, is clinical queries. Now, what clinical queries does, it's searching the same database. It's searching the same, PubMed database and Medline, et cetera, but it's using a slightly tweaked clinical search algorithms. So let's say we're interested in disulfiram and naltrexone. Just put those two in and search like that. We're looking for clinical studies. Okay, so I have options down here. I can set it for therapy, clinical prediction guidelines. I'm sorry, I feel a sneeze coming on. I'm going to have to sneeze. Hang on a second. And having said it, it made the desire go away. Okay, there we go. Clinical prediction guidelines, diagnosis, etiology, and prognosis. I can search broad or I can search narrow. We'll set it for broad for now and see what we got. We got 272 search results. So the results you get in clinical queries, if you're looking for evidence-based practice grade information alone, you're going to get more than that. And so you're going to have to be, you're going to have to be, choosy. And maybe we want to go narrow for that reason and just go with the 23 results we've got here, maybe expand it out. But this is a good way. It's another way of searching for the same information and maybe getting a slightly different and slightly better result because you're approaching your search from a slightly different angle. It's kind of like if you've ever like done collected nuts from a nut tree and you've had to shake the tree. Sometimes you don't get all the nuts down just by shaking one away. You pick slightly different angles and you shake until you get down what you need to fill your basket and whatnot. Similar analogy to this, you take different approaches and you see what you find. So let's look at the first one here. Systematic review and meta-analysis of medications for stimulant use disorders in patients with co-occurring opioid disorders. Now, we saw this one before. I remember this one, but maybe there are others that we haven't seen. So let's go down and meticulous records, you can tell, and just got lots and lots of information. And of course, we have a big similar authors file, and it's been cited quite a bit. So obviously this article, for just coming out 2 years ago, has already had a lot of influence. I was going to advance it directly from here, but I guess there are so few that we don't have to worry about that. So we'll go down here to the next one, substance use disorders among older adults, a review of randomized controlled pharmacotherapy trials. Again, this is one I don't remember seeing. I mean, maybe we did, but I just don't remember seeing it. But yeah, this is one that's new to me. So this may be one that we got just by taking a slightly different approach. Now, this is an editorial rather than a research-based article. And another great thing about PubMed is that it tries to flag the publication type. If it's an important distinction, they will endeavor to make sure that you understand what you're looking at. If I'm looking for research-based information, I'm really not interested in editorials, but I'll keep going. But you'll notice this article came from PubMed Central, and it has, I started to say it has mesh subject headings. I guess it doesn't, but it does have publication type filters. So this one isn't part of the Medline database, but it is part of PubMed Central. And one more. Let's have a look at naltrexone, disulfiram treatment response to veterans with alcohol dependence, co-occurring gambling problem, gambling features. Okay. And again, it's a randomized controlled trial. It fits within our date range, so that would be relevant in terms of clinical decision-making for that. Not really exactly what we're looking for, but that's okay. Another nice thing about the PubMed record, particularly, and this is helpful, particularly when you're looking at a record that has a lot of detailed information, is it gives you this handy navigation over on the right-hand side. So I can go down to the specific section that I want to check out. Unfortunately, that navigation doesn't follow you down the page, but it gets you to where you want to be. So if you just want to look at the mesh terms, it'll take you down there. If you're interested in grants, because sometimes you're looking, you may be at the beginning of a research process and you want funding. It's good to know, what kind of projects were funded by a particular grant. You have grant support numbers here, and you can go and get a list of studies that were funded by that same source. So that can be very, very helpful. It has a cite feature. Most databases nowadays do, and it's got your basics here. You can search, you can set it up for AMA formatting, APA, MLA, and NLM. I don't get real excited about the cite features in databases just because they usually are not that accurate. And at the end of the day, you know, you have to do your own editing anyway. And ultimately, you know, since most of your citation and reference managers have that feature anyway, I reckon you're just better off, you know, getting them all formatted once and then going through with your style guide and just making sure that everything meets specifications. So I don't get too excited about that, but they do have that one there. I don't think anything else here I want to tell you about. I think that will do it. All right, so let me go back and summarize, and then I'll open it up for questions. So PubMed is an umbrella database. It's a database that pulls in information from a number of sources, including the Medline Database, PubMed Central, and Ncbi Bookshelf. So you're getting information from a lot of sources. Material that's coming from the Medline Database has been vetted. The journal itself has been vetted. Okay, the journal was vetted when they started indexing it. PubMed Central is more open access, and it doesn't have the same quality control process. So you're probably going to want to, if you have any doubts, consult a source like the Directory of Open Access Journals and whatnot. PubMed is a really great resource for getting both evidence-based practice information and for a number of other purposes. You can use it to track down corresponding authors, to get permissions if you need help getting those. It's just good for a lot of that stuff. One more thing I wanted to show you before I just remembered this. Okay, so if you're ever in doubt as to whether or not a journal is a Medline journal, of course the mesh headings are a big giveaway. But if you right click on the journal, on the linked journal title there, okay, or I guess left click, let's do left click. Okay, you get three options. You can search for the journal itself in PubMed. You can add it to your current search, or you can search the NLM catalog. Now, the NLM catalog, that's the National Library of Medicine catalog. Every journal that ends up as part of Medline will have an entry in the National Library of Medicine catalog, and many that don't have entries there anyway. This is a great place to come to get information. It's mostly used by people like myself, health science librarians, because it has a lot of helpful data. But one of the things that it provides is it gives you the Medline status of the items. So current indexing status, currently indexed in Medline, right there, and subset Index Medicus, because Medline is the electronic extension. It's the electronic successor to Index Medicus that's been around since the late 19th century. All right. Okay. That's it for me. So I open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions?
Michael, I had to take a call, so I don't know if you answered this, but there is a question. Where do you go to search clinical queries?
Okay, yeah, PubMed Clinical Queries, you come right down here under Find. PubMed Clinical Queries right there. You just enter your search terms and then specify whether since COVID-19, they've added a COVID-19 filter category. Before that, it was just clinical studies, and then you set your filters, whether you're interested in therapy, diagnosis, etiology, prognosis, prediction guidelines, and then you set it for either broad or narrow, and then Bob's your uncle, you just enter your search term and you search terms and hit search, and away you go. Yeah, it's a great tool. It really is. It's another place to look. It's another way to look. It's available in other databases. CINAHL has their own version of it, and theirs has they have like a middling category. They have like a Goldilocks category, the just right category, whereas PubMed just focuses on the narrow and the broad for its scope. But yeah, good question.
I would like to remind you, if you haven't had a chance to sign in, please click on the link that I put in the chat and sign in so you can be entered for our drawings this semester.
Alrighty. Okay, just check the chat real quick here. Okay, if there are no further questions, I thank you for your time, and y'all have a lovely day. Okay, somebody, okay, Peace, were you able to find the link? It's right up here. It's right at the very top.
Sorry, if I posted it in there before you joined, you probably couldn't see it. So I just resubmitted it onto the chat.
Okay, so you see it now? Okay, good deal. All righty. Well, thank you, everybody.